good afternoon, good evening, Jar of Marble dwellers and Jar of Marble curious. My name is Linda and this is my podcast called Jar of Marbles. I hope that you've had a good week. It certainly has been a very exciting one, my end of the world, for no real reason aside that it's just been great weather. We're heading towards spring and it's going to be my birthday. I know it's one of those things. But anyway, this week, what I really wanted to talk about was 7 steps to having less stress. I have found that certain things truly help, and while they're going to seem really obvious, and isn't that the way, simple and obvious, like that if you want to feel less stress, perhaps get a little bit more sleep. For example, it sort of sounds like something your mother would say, well, she was right. It is an absolute fact that none of us have it all worked out. We don't have life figured out, or at least not all of the time. So the first suggestion to relieving stress would be, if I find that I'm getting all caught up and worrying, I do try to make myself realise that I need to come back to today. Deal with today, deal with what is happening now, right now. And it makes a really big difference on your stress levels and being in the moment of what is current and not worrying about yesterday or tomorrow or next week. We can get really carried away with these concerns and we're not taking any notice of where we are today. We might be noticing that we feel lightheaded, sweaty, that our heart is beating fast, 1,000 thoughts are running through your mind. You just feel really uneasy, worrying, scared, concerned, dreading, all of those types of uncomfortable feelings, watching too much of the news, feeling overwhelmed with all that is going on in the world. And meanwhile, you're in your lounge room, glued to the TV. Mind is in another country and you have completely stepped out of today. So focusing on where you are right now, today, something that I find really helps is I try to keep in mind that I'm really watching a carefully put together show that they call The News. And it is devastating and proven to create very poor mental health if you're watching it on a regular basis. So the most natural, I think, obvious thing to do is to cut your viewing of it down. I mean, the doing of it is so helpful. You feel relieved almost immediately. Myself personally, I've really rarely been a news watcher. I may stop and listen now and then then I walk away titting to myself. Now, you may wonder what is titting. Something my mother used to say if I didn't approve of something or I didn't, thought something was silly, I would go, now, parents were allowed to tit, but children were not allowed to tit. And it'd be like, could you stop that titting? So if I hear something on the news that I think is ridiculous, more often than not, I'll have a little tit and off I'll go. I may not know as much as you do regarding the news, but I know enough that it is not running my mental health. Besides, there's always someone dying to repeat some bad news, right? To which you've got to what? Tit. That's right. The second thing that I believe is truly important is staying in touch with friends or family. It could be a neighbour or a community that you might be involved in, whether it be where you live, whether it's online with other people with whom you have something in common or a common goal and interest. And this is where you can also make friends. It's the staying in touch with that community or friend, which I believe is sustaining, and popping in or on to say hi. Even here, if you say hi, I will always acknowledge you. I'll respond and say hi back. So it is really important for your feeling of well-being that you are connecting with people, especially if they are positive, more so definitely. Make you feel good and loved. I mean, I know myself now and then I've popped in onto my daughter's Twitch channel and she has a really amazing community there and I read so often and listen to people talking and they're saying that they've just found such a wholesome, welcoming community. They do play games, etc. But it's a really lovely place to visit. And I have, especially over the pandemic, I'll just pop in and say hello. And I never came away ever feeling regretful. So I was like, well, that was nice. So most days I'm in touch with my children, even if it is by text, just a nice little check-in with each other. We have a family chat where we'll just say good morning to each other, and if there is anything, on the horizon or something coming up, we'll chat about that. But the technology that we have now, we can FaceTime, and as I say, text. It is so important to reach out and not find yourself isolated. It really relieves that feeling of being stressed simply by saying hello and having a little conversation, asking how they are. So you're not in your own mind, creating a situation that actually doesn't even exist. Maybe something that you're thinking about or working on, a trip you may be going on or would like to have. Just that communication, having regular contact really, really helps. The third suggestion is try to get out every day, be in nature. We live in such a beautiful world, and even if it is getting out of your apartment, going for a walk around your estate, have a look at gardens as you're walking by, take in the colours, feed your mind with new information. It's pretty hard to feel like rubbish when you're out walking, right? And purposefully taking in your world, you can check the architecture, taking notice of the sounds you hear, the birds, listening to cars going by. How many yellow cars have you seen so far? Even a plane flying by. Just being outside and breathing in the air is different to being inside too long and too often, and especially if you live on your own. If you live near a park, even better. There will be other people around and you can do some people watching without being creepy. Have a look at the trees in the parks or lining your streets, the flowers, the changes of the seasons happening before you can be so cathartic, especially if you are out walking regularly and you start seeing nature really doing her thing. You'll start noticing what trees go to sleep in the wintertime and what trees stay leafy and alive looking. Then as spring comes into being, you start noticing the new buds of life where there were none the day before. It takes on a quiet majesty that you get to witness, and it is quite breathtaking, and that feeling of renewal and the newness of new life just coming through is quite spectacular. So feeling like that about your immediate environment and taking the time for yourself to be a part of your environment really stops you completely from stressing out. It gives you new perspective, and you can look at things in a fresher way and probably come up with a solution, or look at things in such a way that you realise you're handing over too much of your power, whether it be, a terrible job or whatever it is. I think that finding ways to calm ourselves down means that we're going to be able to go out to the world and find solutions without even trying in some cases. If you've got a dog, take him or her for a walk through the day. It's lovely. Maybe you're close to a beach, maybe there's a dog park, and walking around your neighbourhood, but certainly getting out and about every day where possible is so good overall for you. It is very hard to feel down and out and negative when you're out just walking, with a focus on what your world looks like in terms of it be a park or walking around your immediate area or driving to a suburb that you've always wanted to check out. Same deal. If you actually look, you'll find there is so much to love and be grateful for. The fourth activity I practice if I'm feeling uptight and my brain is on fire, which happens at times when I'm trying to balance too many things. I try to find a quiet place, and that could be just being in a favourite chair or sitting in the bathroom if I have to, in my bedroom, anywhere that I can feel relaxed and feel safe, and I feel like I can really just tune into myself quietly. So all I'm doing is breathing in deeply and purposely, breathing in slowly in through my nose and out through the mouth. And it's so simple and yet so beneficial. I find that when I just simply stop and take in those nourishing deep breaths, after a few minutes I can feel myself just becoming more still. And I just feel like most of the stress has just left my body. And sometimes I'll write too, especially if I just feel like I just want to throw myself overboard. Woman overboard. Sure feels like it at times, Bob. It does. It might not be about how I'm feeling. Sometimes it is the mere practice of writing about a time when I felt happy or a story I was told Maybe I was told that I was loved, or doing activities where I really felt that I was a part of something special. Doing these activities increase your inner feeling of well-being, so you're not focused on all that is ahead of you, especially if it is causing you grief. I sometimes do say out loud to myself, okay, why am I feeling so stressed? And it's not like I'm actually asking myself that question. So sometimes I will also follow that up with, okay, look, I'm feeling really stressed. And I'll say out loud, stop, just stop. Because I can feel myself feeling like I'm at the beginnings of rolling down a hill. And if I don't stop, it's going to get out of control and I won't be able to help myself. So over time, I've learned to just do that and stop. And if you're finding that you're not able to achieve, a quietness or direction that's helpful, maybe go and see a therapist. I think that's one of the smartest things that any of us can do in terms of getting, ideas and skill sets in order to help ourselves, and recognizing when we, aren't feeling on top of our world and it really is getting out of control. I think that the smartest thing any of us can do, if we can't help ourselves in that moment, reach out to get those skills in order to help yourself, because none of us are going to make good decisions while we're feeling stressed out of our brain. And even, as I say before, if you're sitting in a park, just close your eyes. If you're feeling a wee bit inconspicuous, just leave your sunglasses on, sit quietly and breathe. No one is going to take anyone notice. No one's going to take any notice. No one's going to go, oh my God, look at that person over there breathing. Can you believe it? How very, very quiet, right? God. So I've done that myself. Behind my glasses, I've just sat there with my, hands clasped in my lap, and I've actually got my eyes closed, and I'm just taking in my immediate environment, which might just be, I can hear the trees waving a little bit, maybe in a light breeze. Point being is taking that time to stop and just stop. And it really is unbelievably beneficial. I mean, anyone that's already doing something like that, has a practice that works, then you'll be nodding, going, yep, got that, know that. But for people that don't, they might not understand or know that there are really simple solutions that you can start doing. And when you start feeling the benefits, it's really hard not to want to keep on and keep doing these practices that just help you. So anyway, so I find that helps me a lot, and it does. All that oxygen going into my brain and consciously sitting down, making myself feel better. It does feel empowering that I am doing that for me, because I know that I'm out of whack and that I'm not feeling good, and sometimes because I am recognizing that I'm starting to feel uneasy within myself. The breathing brings me back to my center, and I begin to realize that the concerns were overriding everything else in my day. And sometimes it's not anything useful, and sometimes it isn't anything that I should be giving any of my focus or my energy to. Different if I go, okay, I haven't faced that, or that's something I need to look at, that's different. But when it's just an accumulation of just silly little things that feels like a big thing, there are ways out. The fifth suggestion I have is within our world of technology, and I am so guilty of this, sometimes we have to take a break from all things tech. I think scrolling is a biggie. What is it with the need to do endless scrolling? I mean, how addictive is scrolling? It makes me feel a little bit sort of nauseous and slightly embarrassed to admit it. But even when I'm doing it, it actually makes me feel sort of stressed. You embarrassed? Well, I was just testing to see if you were listening, Bob. But anyway, I am a major scroller. Better than being a troller, but hell, I put in serious scrolling time, and it's not like I've plenty to occupy myself with, but when I have free moments, I find myself scrolling. So I am presently working on that at the moment. I have 2 Facebook accounts, an Instagram account, TikTok, and YouTube, Spotify. And I visit my daughter Carla on her Twitch stream. I mean, I'm everywhere. Point being, overload there. So when I step away, purposely leave my phone in the house when I'm out in the studio, it feels like a deep breath. My mobile phone is like an extension of my body, like many of us. I am so attached to my phone. Now, I know that I'm not alone in this and that it is accepted. It's acceptable. We confess on occasion to a friend and we agree wholeheartedly, and then we go and check our phones. We just keep on doing it. So what do I do? What what do I do? What I do is I have a relatively new habit where I put my phone on airplane mode for at least a couple of hours a day. It's like entering back into the 1960s. A lot of you won't even be able to relate to that, but just pretend. When we didn't have mobile phones and we couldn't be distracted or disturbed, and no obsession with the internet existed. It really does help when I'm out and about. I leave my phone in another room, say visiting family, obviously not in a public place. The bottom line is I don't need it. If it is that important, I'm going to hear it ring. But this is just something where I just go, thus far I have had 0 emergencies. Funny that. Limit your news, as said before. For me, it was never a sacrifice, as I've never been a watch the news kind of girl. The reality is that you can do nothing about any of it, and that is if you believe any of it as well, there's no point in walking around feeling weighed down by all the terrible things that bombard us from all around the world and have always gone on for all time. Then you've got fake news. Then there is the repetition telling us the same thing on every channel, and then it becomes hardwired in your brain and you end up feeling like rubbish and weirdly fearful. No, I'm not doing it. Not doing it. That's right, Bob. I'd rather talk to you. The only reason I know anything that's going on is because people tell me. And it's always a very short conversation. The truth is, as I sit here in my studio, whatever is going on outside of this space, in another suburb, city, state, country, what can I do about it in this moment except sit and be concerned? And how does that help anyone? My family, friends, and myself. It is at least kinder to yourself to limit your watching time, as it stresses everyone out. I know someone who just goes for gold with all the bad things that are here and all the terrible things that are coming to pass. I have put my hand up and say, thanks for that, and disappear. My job is taking care of myself so I can be a fun and helpful mum, grandmother, friend, neighbour, etc. That's my job. Make life a bit better for those around me here on planet Earth, minus the news, and they do the same for me. Deep breaths. Breathe in and hold and breathe out. Number 6, you really got to get plenty of sleep. Research shows that if you can, be asleep before 11 p.m. and get up at 7 a.m. are the best hours. Now, that is not going to work for those early morning gym goers like myself and people having to commute to work more often than not. That was me. I am out cold, 10 or earlier at night. But I'm wide awake at 5 a.m. and I've got to say I feel good. A sleep in to me is 7 a.m. and I feel like a champion. 12 hours later, I'm still going strong and still full of energy. I paint quite regularly, canvases that is, so I have found that slows me down and relaxes me to bits, and then sleeping just seems to be the next stop. I also paint in bed. It's just where I paint. It's a habit formed during the pandemic, and here we are. I set myself up with all my paint pots, cushions, towels, a big cup of tea, a canvas, listen to music or a comedy, and then dive into the relaxation that is painting. To me, some people suffer from insomnia and have tried lots of different medications, and that is not always successful. Sometimes when I can't sleep, which is not often, but when it does happen, I just get up and I will make myself a nice, cup of gentle herbal tea, and then usually I'll just crawl back into bed and get a solid 2 hours of REM sleep, which is better than nothing. The 7th suggestion is bad habits. Myself, here I go. I developed a sugar craving, never had one before, and so it crept up quite insidiously. And before I knew it, I was as fat as a house. No, that's not true. Before I knew it or decided to replug my brain in, I was grabbing all sorts of sugary delights at the superb marquee. What's a superb marquee? That is my word for a supermarket, Bob. I went and had tests and all was fine. They didn't test on me. They didn't do the test, me who was making bad decisions and didn't care. It was me. I was the culprit. There was nothing wrong with me except shoveling garbage down my throat. I had developed it all by myself. Yes, I know, deep bow, and thank you, Bob, thank you. No. Look, anywho, I had to look at it and do something about the cravings that I'd created. Oh, I did such a good job. I'm still kind of cleaning up my mess, but I'm doing it. Had I not stopped, I probably would have ended up ultimately with some kind of health problem. And especially at my age, now is the time to look after oneself. When you get into your 60s, you don't want to be doing anything too wild because we can't bounce back the way we did, in our 20s, for example. Now, in saying that, we all have habits. Bad habits. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to look at you. Well, you wouldn't be able to look at me for the glow of my halo and the feathers of my wings stuck up your nostrils. If you have a bad habit, try to eliminate it slowly. Not all of us can do the cold turkey thing, right? That is the lecture over. And now the other thing I wanted to say is the focusing on the now. Now, I know that this has been said so many times that it is something we read maybe on a plaque or a post as, I'm focusing on the now. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm focusing on the now. And then we immediately go back to whatever it was that we were focusing on for hours in a day. And mostly that's not good stuff. The good news is if you are aware that you do that, then you are going to work it out. Stress can hit you from behind suddenly and unexpectedly. It can be a late reaction to an incident, something someone said. I remember being a bit of a late reactor when I was a young woman. Sometimes it would be like a week later. I would think, wait a minute. Usually when I was about to fall asleep or I was knee-deep in dishes and suddenly I would recall a conversation and realise what the other person had said and what they had meant, and it had gone right over my head. And they may have been really rude or totally incorrect in their assumption, and perhaps I wasn't listening or a few things were happening at the same time. Then the marble drops and you realise you missed something that feels crucial. This is not something that I fall for so easily anymore, but years ago it was something common enough that many of us have experienced, a rite of passage of sorts, and there are so many to choose from of those, isn't there? One morning in New Zealand, I was living on an organic pear farm owned by two teachers who were moving down the South Island for a while, and I was fortunate enough to be able to rent it for a while, and it had just miles of, well, it probably wasn't miles. I never did know how big the lay of the land was, but they had these huge paddocks that had organic pears and apple trees, beg your pardon, and it also had a spooky post office on the property as well. And I'd go into that post office on occasions and I would just sit in there imagining what it must have been like 100 years ago. The building itself was one of two original outposts still in existence in the South Island of New Zealand. It was filled with energies, there was no doubt about it. Not frightening, but it did feel very congested. Let's put that down to the dust. That would have been as old as the building itself. The property had enormous walnut trees, a grassy tennis court, huge greenhouses. That must have been the organic trees' starting point, I'd imagine, and many raised garden beds on the lower part of the land. There was a big red telephone box in the bushes and trails that took you to beautiful natural nature spots, including geese and ducks who just wandered around. Looking back, I never questioned where those ducks came from. Anyway, there were hedges that were so high to protect the home and orchards from gusts that occur there regularly. I don't know if you've ever been to the South Island of New Zealand, but as you start getting down Canterbury ways, there are these huge hedges that are on the land, and it's just protecting homes and properties because the winds can just get pretty outrageous. So anyway, these hedges were so deep that the kids actually found a full dining set with chairs inside one of them. The hedges were at least 14 metres high, and one day my two eldest daughters got stuck on the top and were unable to get down. That was a bit stressful, but after much coaxing and directing of foot positioning, they both got down safely. Living in the country seemed to be something we enjoyed, and I still dream of that as a possibility, as it is a beautiful way to live and so good for kids. No matter where you live, there will always be stress, but in the country, it is a different kind of stress. I did observe that when we had lived in a slower paced environment, as we have a number of times. You do start keeping pace with that, and in turn slows you down naturally. But you can't go back. But every day, I wish I could. Here we are at the end of yet another podcast. It's been lovely to have you aboard. I hope that you enjoyed 7 Steps to Less Stress. I hope that you found it interesting or reconfirming, inspiring. I love a bit of inspiration myself. It's good to get that feeling that, you know what, I'm going to do that. I'm going to try that. I want to read you something that I found written by a Zaina Keithley, and I thought it was quite lovely. And if it resonates with you, then it might be something for you to think about or enjoy. It feels like a waiting period is over. I felt like I was ready to take bold steps, feeling confident and self-belief. I felt like I had only dreamed of this, like it was and could only be a dream. You are no longer willing to play dead, play small, or settle for anything less than the endlessly abundant life you deserve. I love that. I have tried to say goodbye 5 times every time I do a motorbike drives by. I know, first world problems, but I just thought I'd share it with you, Marbles. All right? Good. Well, I hope that you have a fabulous week, and thank you so much again for coming by, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Say good day to the family and the horse for me. All right. Bye.